Welcome back to the Daily Dose of Truth with your host, Minio Francescini. It's the 21st of June. My mistake, 22nd of June. Today here in Adelaide, South Australia. And it's been actually over a month since I did my last recording. I hope you are well, wherever you may be tuning in from. I have noticed on the statistics that there are quite a few listeners from the US and other parts of the world. There is a small percentage of listeners here in Australia from where I'm actually recording. My hometown, of course, Adelaide, South Australia. Not many listeners, but hopefully that will change. Well, today I want to continue looking at the theme of anti-Semitism and what purpose it serves in God's sovereign will, and why has God permitted acts of hatred. Of course, we cannot blame God necessarily, because humans indeed are, of course, responsible. But at the same time, we also must acknowledge that God is sovereign and that He does permit evil, including anti-Semitism, and can use even anti-Semitism to accomplish His plan. Now, that might be really a radical statement to some of you that might be listening, that God could even orchestrate or permit Satan. Because how could Satan do anything, including anti-Semitism or using Hitler or using any other modern day form of anti-Semitism, as we recently saw here in Australia with the Jodie Scarcella incident at a children's netball game, girls' netball game, where the racist or racial hatred comments, F the Jews, apparently were heard from this woman's mouth. And then, of course, we had the Bondi shootings last year here in Australia. But there's no shortage of anti-Semitic news going on daily around the world. So the mystery here is that, can God permit Satan to actually afflict both the believing Jews, that is those who have put their faith in Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ the Lord, that is, the Son of God, those who have had that revelation, because there are many Jews who are actually Bible-believing, confessing that Jesus is Lord in their personal lives. And of course, there are many Jews who do not or have not had that personal revelation yet, but perhaps today, even under the listening and to the sound of my voice, you might actually have an awakening wherever you're listening from. There might be an awakening to your heart today by the divine will of God. And the sad reality is that God has permitted evil for his purpose, it is a simultaneous reality that coexists right alongside the righteous will and plan of God. And whilst we may not fully understand why God permits evil and why he has permitted and is still permitting anti-Semitism, even in 2026, we do have to acknowledge that God is in control, even of anti-Semitism, even of all of the enemies of the believing Jews and non-believing Jews in Messiah Jesus Christ, that is. And how even when we trace all the way back to the book of Esther, and perhaps we could go even back further than that, between hatred of the first two brothers, where one was permitted to murder the other, and God still blessed Cain in that he was willing to protect Cain. That whoever found him would not have authority to murder him because his punishment was too severe. Do you remember that story, guys? Where Cain actually murders his brother Abel because his offering was more pleasing. Abel's offering was more pleasing to God. And God's punishment to Cain was that he would allow him to roam throughout the earth, and that whoever found him would hurt and afflict him or injure him. And Cain was scared and afraid to live. But who were these people anyway? Where did they come from? That's another mystery. Where was that population from? If it was only two people or two sons that were born to Adam and Eve, where were all these people that Cain was supposed to be afraid of come from? Was there another race of people that we do not know about? Well, we won't get into that right at this very moment. But the point is that God actually said that he would actually not allow those mysterious people who were on the earth to actually afflict Cain or to murder him. That God would actually protect him, even though he actually did an evil act in the sight of God. So you can see that God uses all things for his glory, all things for his purpose. And then we go over to the book of Esther, we can see that God allowed the rising up of the hatred of the Jews. And it was through Haman, the one who wanted all of the Jews to be annihilated. And then, of course, God raised up Esther to be the answer to that hatred. But the one wasn't present without the other. You had to have one in order so that you could have the other. So is there ever going to be a time on earth, whether it be presently or in the future, and we certainly know from the past that it was not this way, that God is going to remove all evil? Yes, that is going to be the case, but when? That is going to be in the new heaven and then the new earth. Until then, both evil or righteousness and evil shall coexist alongside one another. And anti-Semitism is a part of that reality. Hate to say it, but we're going to see more acts of anti-Semitism, not because I hate believing Jews or non-believing Jews, but that in itself is another question. Who are the true Jews? Is it those who believe in Messiah, those who've had a heart circumcision, not just a physical foreskin circumcision according to the Old Testament? but it was a heart conversion, a heart circumcision that qualifies a person to be a Jew. And of course, then, who is a Jew? How do we define who a Jew is? Is it simply ethnicity? Is it DNA? Is it one who's born into a family that has that ethnicity and DNA? Is it cultural? Is it conversion to the religious Judaism? The religious or the practice, the religious practice of Judaism. So who and what qualifies a person to be a Jew? And then on what grounds should anti-Semitism be qualified based on what qualifies a person to be a Jew? Can you see how complicated this issue is? It's not a simple issue, and that we can just say, oh yeah, every act of violence or hatred or racial discrimination against this group of people qualifies as anti-Semitism? Well, no, it can't be said, because whilst we might look at the Holocaust of World War II and the racial hatred of the Nazi Party led by Adolf Hitler, considering all those who identified as Jews, whether they were believing Jews or non-believing Jews, that didn't really matter. So here there's another distinction. Should it be believing Jews or non-believing Jews that should be targeted, persecuted, racially hated, exterminated? Which ones should be removed from the earth? Why isn't there a distinction? Can you see the further complexity, my friends, today, of how this issue of anti-Semitism is not a simple issue? So let's have a look at some of the thoughts that come out of the scriptures, and some of what I'm trying to give language to, or give a framework to here, because you can see this is a far more complex issue than the way the media portrays it, the government portrays it, the Jews themselves would like to portray it. Even Christian Zionism portrays it in certain ways. I mean, they all might have a portion of truth, but in essence, really, none of them are completely right in and of themselves. And none of them really qualify to really say that this group should be persecuted, this group should not. The believing Jews should be. All of Zionist agendas and efforts are all biblical and are all because God wants it to be that way. No, I don't agree with that. When we look at the actions of Israel today against Iran, not all of that's biblical. What the US did to the kindergarten school of 165 young kindergarten age girls, was not right in God's eyes. Somebody's got to pay for that. So do you see the complexity, my friends? Just because Israel aligns with America and decries anti-Semitism, does that give them a right to carry on with their violence against Palestinians? No, it doesn't, because not every Palestinian person is an evil person. Some of them are actually Bible-believing people. There are Christian Palestinians who believe in the Messiah, just like some Zionist Christians do. Some believing Jews in the Messiah do. So, sorry guys, I don't agree with the mainstream narrative that anti-Semitism is actually justified. In fact, I actually think that anti-Semitism is a tool in God's hands. Now, I know that I need to be very careful in what I'm saying here, but it can be used to actually purify God's people in the right way, because we can see that the Bible-believing Jew and even the non-believing Jew in Messiah, that is all of a sudden finding themselves in a desperate place to cry out to God. So anti-Semitism can be used to cry out to God. Suffering is used to cry out to God. And I know that it shouldn't be that way, that we should have acts of hatred and racial discrimination and violence against Jews or any other group of people for that matter. Anti-Semitism, specifically applies to the Jews, but according to whose definition? According to what definition? The Bible doesn't give precedent for anti-Semitism saying that it's for the Jews, because if you want to break down the word Semitic or Semitism, there is more than just the Jews who are Semites. The Arabs are Semites as well. So it's not just the Jews who are Semites, it's also the Arabs and all of the descendants of the Shemitic or the Semite people. The people that descend from Shem. They are the Semites. And it's not just the Jews, my friends. Start looking into these things for yourself. I find it really difficult listening to Christians even who are so sold out on this idea that anti-Semitism is actually God using the Christians to get the world's attention, because all of a sudden they're in defense of all the Jewish people as well as the homeland of Israel, and that every Christian has a right to stand politically, militarily, just in their own efforts sometimes. Sorry, I disagree, guys. That's not the reality of it. Anti-Semitism is not just about Jews. It's about anybody who's a Semite. It's true, guys. Do you know in 1947, the Jewish agenda for a Jewish home state actually displaced Christian Palestinians who were probably legally in the place where they should be. They were probably ancestors of the descendants of Israel. Some of those Palestinians that were there in 1948 were displaced by a Zionist agenda that was political. And 1948 was not, my friends, again, listen to this might blow your mind, but 1948 was not the entire fulfillment of biblical prophecy of all the Jews, because the Jews are only one or two or three, in fact there are 3 of the 12 tribes that should be present in Israel. In fact, where are the other 10 tribes? Because Israel and the Jews are actually all the 12 tribes. So when all 12 tribes are present in Israel, and not just in Israel, but are right around the earth, because Israel is also the Gentiles, which is also Israel, which are also the born-again believers, which are also the scattered sheep of the house of Israel, which are also the 2 houses of Israel. We've used the term Gentile to describe people who are actually also Jews, and also the 10 northern tribes. This is another complexity, guys, to this issue? You see how complicated this is? My friends, this is a very complex issue and requires much research, much understanding, much defining, and much deliberating. So the theological idea and instinct that I'm proposing here does have deep biblical roots. Scripture repeatedly shows that God is sovereign, even when hostile powers act wickedly, and that He can bring preservation, repentance, witness, and deliverance out of events meant for destruction. That's right, guys. This has happened right throughout history and is still happening even today, guys. God still uses and permits Satan to deliver acts of violence in the earth, and God uses them for His glory. Just like He did with Job. He permitted Satan to afflict Job for His purpose. But the distinction between God permitting and overruling evil, and God positively endorsing, requiring, or morally approving hatred is essential to understand here, guys, especially when speaking of antisemitism. The Bible does not outrightly portray hatred of Jews as a holy instrument in and of itself. It does portray persecutors as morally accountable, for sure, even when God later turns their actions towards His purposes. And we see that even with, as I said, Haman in the book of Esther. And then we can see that even with the Assyrians, when the Assyrians take the northern tribes into captivity in 726 BC. So then God later punishes and judges the Assyrians. So we can see that pattern continues. And it even continues today, my friends. God allowed Hitler, Germany, to actually be the persecutor of the Jews. But we then see that Germany itself went into severe depression, financial depression. The country went into collapse. We saw reparation payments, indebtedness to the nations of billions of Deutschmarks. And that was only just recently paid off and the Deutschmark was of no value. I mean, in fact, the German currency was of such little value that it took like 1 million Deutschmark or 1 billion Deutschmark to buy one loaf of bread. In fact, people used paper notes, money, to actually start fires with. It was of absolute no value. So God judged Germany, although He permitted Germany to actually afflict and bring ethnic cleansing to the Jews. God only understands these things, my friends. We do not. So the pattern continues even into modern times. We can see that this distinction guards against treating Jewish suffering as deserved, spiritually useful in itself, or something Christians should interpret with certainty from outside the suffering. So whilst we may not be able to do that is interpret the suffering with a certainty that God had to do this to accomplish his plan. Though we may not be able to say that with certainty, we cannot say with certainty that God did not permit this for a purpose that included bringing some kind of crying out from the Jewish people, whether that be the believing Jews or the non-believing Jews in Messiah. Do you see how this works both ways, guys? God uses all of this for his purpose. We've already mentioned the book of Esther is one of the clearest biblical accounts of a threatened Jewish people. Haman seeks not merely to punish particular individuals, but to destroy an entire dispersed people. Esther 3, verses 8 and 9, and then 3:13. The narrative's theological force is that God's name is never explicitly spoken, yet deliverance is implied through fasting, courage, reversals, and Mordecai's conviction that relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. Esther 4:14. So, guys, many scholars therefore read Esther as a narrative of hidden providence. Divine action is not presented as competing with human action, but as working through Esther's courage, Mordecai's warning, the king's sleeplessness, and Haman's downfall. So, the text does not say that Haman's genocidal hatred was God's moral plan, in the sense that God approved it. Yet, on the one hand, he did approve it to arise, so that Esther could arise. So you can see again this pattern. The opposite, the contrary, the undesired must be present in order for the desired, and God's answer, the solution, to also come forth, which was through Esther and through Mordecai and through King Ahasuerus. So this story shows God overturning evil. It does not sanctify the evil, of course. So this is an important formulation, guys. God may incorporate evil acts into his redemptive purposes, without becoming the author of those acts or removing the guilt of those who commit them. But he does give authorship to Satan. So whilst he may not be directly the author, he does give permission to Satan to be the author. So is there a difference there, guys? I'll let you decide. This is the same biblical pattern seen in Joseph's words to his brothers. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Genesis 50, verse 20. The brothers' betrayal was evil. God's preservation of life through it was good. Both truths stand. Yeah. God's sovereignty and human responsibility, guys. There's been lots of boom, bam moments throughout this episode. Episode 28, in fact, of the Daily Dose of Truth. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Episode 28 of the Daily Dose of Truth. I think this is installment 3 on the second time round of anti-Semitism, guys. God's sovereignty and human responsibility. The Bible is unwilling to surrender either divine sovereignty or human moral responsibility. In Isaiah 10, Assyria becomes the rod of God's anger against Israel's sin. Yet Assyria is not excused. It acts from arrogance, conquest, and a desire to destroy. Afterward, God judges the king of Assyria for the fruit of his stout heart and his proud looks. Isaiah 10, verses 5 to 19. In Habakkuk, God announces that Babylon will be used as an instrument of judgment, but Babylon too will face judgment for violence, greed, idolatry, and bloodshed. Habakkuk 1 and 2. This means that even if one believes God permits persecution within his larger providence, one cannot conclude that the persecutor is doing God's will in a morally praiseworthy sense, guys. Yeah, that's true. It's nothing to be we cannot praise it, obviously, but we certainly wrestle with the reality that God permits and even uses Satan to accomplish his plan, and evil nations and evil rulers for that matter, which continues on today in 2026 and beyond, guys. That observers may be indifferent, or that suffering can be confidently assigned a specific divine explanation. Guys, I'm going to leave it there today. I will continue in the next episode. But I don't know if anyone here who's listening on the podcast today has seen the Corrie ten Boom story. If you haven't, you can go over to YouTube, type in The Voice of the Martyrs or the Torchlighters series, and then type in the Corrie ten Boom story. And there you can see how the ten Boom family, who was helping rescue Jews, the Jews themselves were actually saved in the secret room, but the ten Boom family, who were the rescuers, were unfortunately taken and rounded up and taken to Auschwitz. The father was killed, executed, and Betsy, I should say, died of sickness in the concentration camp, while Corrie ten Boom was released after experiencing much torture, guys, much suffering, much hatred. And yet it was all part of God's will that would then go on to lead Corrie ten Boom to tell about her testimony of what she experienced at the hands of the Nazis. But then, whilst speaking one of her stories in a church service and speaking about forgiveness and forgiving her persecutors and the Nazis, at the very end of one of the lines of people who were coming to give her thanks and share their thoughts with her about her testimony, at the very end of one of the lines was actually the very man who had actually been her persecutor in the Nazi concentration camp in Auschwitz. And there she learned to forgive that man, Hans, who was actually the persecutor. So God uses both evil and righteousness again to accomplish his plan. This is a very clear and powerful reality, guys, that God permits evil but then uses it for his good. And if you can't get your head around that, well, then you're facing a denial of reality, and you're facing a denial of the fact that many Christians today, whether it be Pakistan in Lahore, whether it be Christians in Nigeria, whether it be Christians here in Australia, we face persecution. God permits the persecution. He also permits righteousness and allows righteousness to rule and to reign. And we desire that to rule and to reign over all evil, of course. But in this world, both will coexist until the new earth and the new heavens will become the new reality, where there will be no more evil. No evil will be permitted, because evil will have been fully conquered. And the cross, Calvary's cross, and the fullness of what it achieved will have been fully finished. Yes, Jesus said it's finished, but that was the initiation of the process, not the completion of the process. We see some completion of the process of Calvary's cross here and now, but not all, because much evil still reigns on the earth today, guys, against God's people. The Jews, antisemitism, it's all part of God's plan. Get comfortable with it and begin to thank God for it. Bless you, my friends, my brothers and sisters, and see if the things that I have not shared today and said today are not the reality of how it has been in the past, is today, and what it will be until the final consummation of the bride of Christ on this side of eternity, guys. Bless you guys, and speak to you in the next episode.